expert on these Manchurian candidates. Jim Marrs is an American former newspaper journalist, New York Times best-selling author. He was a crime reporter for the 4-Star Telegram, and articles on a wide range of cover-ups. He wrote the book for Oliver Stone's film. It just goes on and on. He taught the first college course on the JFK assassination at the University of Texas at Arlington. He's a member of Scholars for 9/11 Truth. JimMarrs.com is his website. Jim, this is a quick segment. We're going to come back, but let's go through some of the history of MK Ultra over and over again. I've got to say, over 80% of the time, we end up proving that these guys were in government programs. They had a shooter years ago up in Fort Worth, 12 years ago, turned out was in a secret Navy mind control program. Remember the guy that went in the Baptist church?
Yeah, that was the church shooting, yeah.
I mean, it just never ends. We're not the ones reporting this. We're just covering it. You've got the floor on the history of mind control.
Well, this really goes back, again, to the Nazis. As you well know, since you've read and promoted my book, The Rise of the Fourth Reich. In fact, the judges at the Nuremberg war crime trials sentenced 7 German scientists to death for their part in human mind control experiments. Well, the CIA picked it up, and by 1954, the Artichoke program was underway as part of the CIA's technical services staff. And they were not alone. The Navy was also working at this. And that's why in 1959 we saw the book, The Manchurian Candidate, which was made into that movie with Frank Sinatra. During the Korean War, early 50s, there was a lot of concern about them getting hold of some of our soldiers and brainwashing them and turning them into brainwashed assassins and spies. And what's amazing is there was a Marine at Atsugi Base in Japan who served with Lee Harvey Oswald, who said that Oswald had been part of an LSD experiment there. So while I personally do not think that Oswald was necessarily a brainwashed assassin, that we still have the telltale fingerprints of government mind control experiments and drug experiments. They even killed a man named Olson who threw himself out of a window after being surreptitiously flipped LSD. This is your tax dollars in action. So it's certainly not any way far out of line to be talking about brain-controlled.
Well, they had the 77 hearings where they admitted they spent billions of dollars in creating mind control assassins who have no memory.
Exactly. And the thing is, too, if you'll go back to some of the notorious shooting instances, Cho at Virginia Tech, which, by the way, was right there by Blackburn, Tennessee, which is some of these mind control and drug experiments were going on, and the shooting down at Fort Hood, which was an Army psychiatrist, who ended up shooting a lot of the people that belonged to the psychiatric department. Now, you know, what's going on here? Well, of course, the media, all they can talk about is guns. Guns. Well, you know, come on, I grew up in Texas. We all had guns. We took guns to school sometime. Nobody shot anybody. The difference is drugs. It's the drugs. Cho, the 2 boys at Columbine, all these guys, they were all on psychiatric, psychotropic drugs. And when you get people on those types of drugs, you got all kinds of problems.
And by the way, just to interrupt and back you up, in the 1980 trials of Prozac, they found a massive increase in psychotic breaks, people going into almost a dream state, and that their normal impulse control was no longer there. So if you got somebody who already leaning towards psychopathic behavior, then you get a woman drowning her 4 kids or chopping their arms off, or people going, and in almost every case, I can't even think of any, Kip Kinkle, Harris Klebold, the list, they're always on Prozac-type serotonin reuptake inhibitors, which also were developed for the government decades before as psychotropic mind control drugs. Please continue.
Exactly. In fact, at first of 2009, I believe, the largest cause of death in the U.S. military was suicide. They even shut down Fort Campbell, Kentucky for a time because they were having such an outbreak of suicides, and all those people were given psychiatric drugs. It's the drugs, but you're not going to hear about that in the corporate-controlled mass media because the pharmaceutical corporations are one of, if not their largest, advertisers appetizer, so they're not going to talk about that. But, Alex, you do, you can, and you do.
Please continue getting into mind control.
Okay. Well, you had Dr. Sidney Gottlieb, who was authorized by Alan Dulles, who, let's not forget, sat on the Warren Commission to figure out, gee, what really happened to President Kennedy. And he began to set up the MKUltra program. Of course, and even with all we know today, and all of that's been well documented, it's been an object of congressional committees, but even with what we know today, we don't really know the full extent of that because Richard Helms ordered Gottlieb to destroy all of their documentation. But it's all been continued on at Plum Island and at Fort Detrick and all of these other places. And one of the things in my new book, The $1 Trillion Conspiracy, which I want to thank you, Alex, for helping to promote, there's a whole section on mycoplasma. Mycoplasma is a wall-less protein that actually activates disease, bacteria, and viruses, and causes a variety of ailments, such as fibromyalgia, Alzheimer's, diabetes type 2, just on and on. But it depends on your individual proclivity. Now, this is an incredibly wonderful biological weapon because most doctors can't find it because they're looking for a virus or a bacteria, and you can't find it.
And that's Plum Island, just like the Lyme's disease.
Exactly. And this mycoplasma, by the way, is probably the cause of Lyme disease. And we had this, the Nazis brought it over, we perfected it, crystallized it, turned it into a synthetic, and in 1986 sold it to Saddam Hussein. And then, of course...
And that came out in congressional hearings.
Yes. And then during the first Gulf War, he used it against the U.S. troops, who then carried this back over to the United States. And according to several doctors, this is now has spread throughout the United States population.
And the government's got the treatment for it, but won't tell the troops because then they'd have to admit that it came from what our own government gave Saddam Hussein. That's even come out in congressional hearings. We're going to be back in 60 seconds. We're going to start the second hour. Some stations 5-6 minutes who carry the news. And I want to get into the history of mind control, Sirhan with RFK, so many others. Then we're going to look at Jared Lee Loughner, this demonic creature who killed all of these people and wounded so many others, and the media now saying restrict free speech in America because of this. Are we going to let them further destroy the Republic because of their walking dead they got out there? We'll be right back. Stay with us. But I want to talk now with Jim Marrs. Here's the Reuters headline: Shooting could tame tough political rhetoric. Protesters parade a altered photo of President Barack Obama spouting an Adolf Hitler-like mustache. A candidate for the Senate muses about gun remedies if election results don't go the right way. Members of Congress are spat on and taunted with racial epithets before casting votes for health care reform bill. Turned out that was a lie, by the way. Welcome to politics, American style. And then they go on and say, better restrict free speech. Don't put people on all this Prozac type stuff that they have to put on the insert can cause violent outburst or suicide. Don't lie about WMDs. Don't know. All of that can continue. Just shut us up. And here it is, CBS News. Obama eyeing Internet ID for Americans. That's the beginning of tracking and taxing everything. Jim Marrs.
Yep. That seems to be the whole program. And, of course, the problem is it's always plausible deniability. So, for instance, at this point, we don't know whether Jared Lee Loughner, was truly just a nutcase and acted on his own, or if he was part of some sinister conspiracy, if you will. That'll all shake out, I guess, in the wash. But, of course, by the time we finally figure out which of those two choices it is, then they'll already be pushing full court for, more and more gun control, more and more Internet control, less and less free speech. In fact, you know what, Alex, would you agree with me on this? I think the answer to all this is the exact opposite of what they're saying. They're saying we need to restrict free speech, we need to curtail the the Internet. We need to, in other words, sit down and shut up. And I say, no, it's the exact opposite. We need to reveal and lay everything out on the table.
That's right, because the path the globalists with their social engineering is taking us on is the design collapse of society, and out of that chaos, they then bring total tyranny as their order, as their solution. The answer is, like so many shootings that have been stopped by somebody owning a gun, I guarantee you, I have a political rally, or I'm at an event, I got somebody there packing heat. You better believe it, quietly. The answer is more guns, not less. And it was people physically taking him down that stopped it. It took the cops 5 minutes to get there, which isn't bad, but still, he probably would have killed 100 people if somebody hadn't tackled him. And what if they'd have had a gun? They could have just blown his head off a lot quicker.
That would put a stop to it right there. And the thing is, absolutely. You know, actually, that goes back years to when they first were having all these airline hijacking, and people were hijacking aircraft and saying, take me to Cuba. And even back then, I said, you know, instead of shaking everybody down and putting in expensive X-ray machines, and of course, I had no idea at that time that they'd actually be making you strip down and fondling your genitals and all like that. I mean, even the Nazis didn't have the audacity to try that in a public place. But even back then, I said, you know, why don't they just have a stewardess with a tray of little Saturday night specials, give them to everybody on the plane, and nobody would dare stand up and say, I'm taking over this plane. It's the same
And for
thing.
idiots that say it would depressurize the plane, you put what air marshals use, sheer safety slugs that won't shoot through a plane, but will liquefy somebody's insides. They have a lot of punch, but it's only right on impact.
Yeah, you're not going to bring down the airplane with that. But then that's kind of pushing it to the extreme. But you're absolutely correct. If everyone, you think of the old West, okay, and of course you think of the gunfight.
Stay there. Let's finish this talk on the other side, because you know Homeland Security is proposing everybody wear a bracelet with a taser in it. I'm not kidding. We'll be right back with Jim Marrs to finish up with that thought, and then we're going to get into more on mind control and more on this demon creature. We'll be right back. There are literally scores of news articles saying conspiracy theories must be banned. That means not believing the government. Scientists decades ago said they're mining the sodium fluoride out of rocks that have uranium in it. Don't drink the tap water. Now it's mainstream news in Texas that the state government with the feds covered it up for 2 decades. Source CBS News, Associated Press. Well, here it is. I guess I'm a conspiracy theorist. Vitriol cited as possible factor in Arizona tragedy. The NPR. Here's an AP. In the aftermath of Gifford shooting, a debate over heated political rhetoric. Here's another one. Reuters. Shooting could tame tough political rhetoric. And it goes on and says, oh, somebody spit on congressmen who weren't for the health care bill. Turned out that was a hoax. You know, the point is, nobody has prior restraint on me and my free speech. I'm free. And now we've got TSA putting their hands down our pants and putting up telescreens in Walmarts and other stores saying spy on your neighbors. I mean, is every cornfield going to have security guards in it? I'm going to put on screen a Wired magazine article. 3 years ago, we first found this video from Homeland Security. And Homeland Security had a meeting. They're proposing it. They were looking at it. People didn't believe it. Well, here's Wired magazine. Bad idea. The anti-hijacking safety bracelet is what it's called. It's a taser bracelet because it's funny. Jim Marrs, author, researcher, best-selling author, his latest book is The $1 Trillion Conspiracy, available at Infowars.com, the online video bookstore if you want to get it. And he said, next, it's going to be like The Running Man with Schwarzenegger. That's actually a Stephen King book, made into the film under another name. A bracelet around our neck that tasered us. And during the break, I said, Jim, you haven't heard? They're actually proposing that we all wear taser bracelets. I mean, land of the free, home of the brave, a total police state, the name of safety. There's never enough cops. There's never enough. It was citizens that stopped this guy, a woman, when he was putting a new clip in, that grabbed the gun away and 2